first speaker.
Hi. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is A.Martinez, and this is my colleague, Annie Davis. Tonight we will be debating the greatest scandal to ever occur, the authorship question, and how for years the wrong man has been idolized. William Shakespeare is believed to be the renowned playwright of so many famous plays, when indeed the writer was Edward de Vere. We can no longer let bygones be bygones anymore. We must take a stand and give credit where credit is due. Our three main arguments will be Edward de Vere's knowledge of Elizabeth's court and his superior education. William Shakespeare's writing shows a high level of education and knowledge that a person can only know if he was involved in the royal courts and endured in high education. Edward de Vere is one person that displays all the qualifications that he could be educated. He graduated from Cambridge University at 14 years old and became a Master of Arts at 16. He also studied law at Gray's Inn, and account books show that he has an extensive library underlining his qualifications to write as knowledgeable as Shakespeare. Also, as Shakespeare's works has a setting of Venice, Edward de Vere is known to have traveled to Italy in 1570, putting him in an ideal position to write knowledgeably about Venice for the story The Merchant of Venice. Our second point is Edward de Vere was afraid to be frowned upon by aristocratic publishing. A standard line for why Edward de Vere used the nom de plume, a pen name, of Shakespeare was to avoid breaking an aristocratic convention not to write. It appears that this convention was weakly enforced and that the aristocrats' publishing was frowned upon rather than punished. This convention weakening entirely in Elizabeth's time, to which Edward de Vere belonged. Alexander Wright, he was an advocate for Shakespearean theory, says, researching a new book on Shakespeare's sonnets, I stumbled upon an astonishing piece, unnoticed evidence in 16th century book. We're not going to bore you with the details, but it suffices to say that William Colville, the author, revealed in words not especially ambitious by Elizabethan standards that Shakespeare was a pen name by the poet Edward de Vere. Sorry about that, I kept getting stumbled. And also our final point is that there were many similarities between Edward and Hamlet, the story written by Shakespeare's life. Hamlet was basically an autobiography about Edward de Vere's life. There are references about tennis, which would also show that at the tennis court fallouts with Sydney, Hamlet himself became Edward de Vere, the 17th Earl of Oxford, and was unhappily married to Anne Sellies. Oxford believed that his wife had been unfaithful to him while he was away on a European tour, and for a time at least, seemed to have doubted that he was the father of the first child. So, in conclusion, Edward de Vere is the rightful owner and author of William Shakespeare's play. Edward de Vere did have high knowledge of Elizabethan court and a superior education. He was also afraid of being frowned upon for aristocratic publishing. There is also similarities between Edward's life and the character Hamlet. These three reasons have valid evidence to back up their reasoning, and people will understand that Edward de Vere is the true William Shakespeare. Any questions?
So where you say
You see, can you stand, please? Question?
is credit where credit is due, do you mean the 37 plays and 100 sonnets are not credible?
How can they be credible if that's what we're arguing who they belong to? So all that aside, what else has he done with his life? Can show that he's a true author. Okay, good morning. My name is Judy, and I'm here with my partner Celeste and Lance. A major controversy today is brewing over the very continuous issue: did William Shakespeare write his own plays? Today, my group and I have came here to inform you to as why William Shakespeare's plays should not in any way, shape, or form be attributed to Edward de Vere. No other man should be accredited for what Shakespeare built from the ground up. For this reason, my partners and I must uphold the con side of this debate. We intend to prove that William Shakespeare's plays should be attributed to none other than Shakespeare himself. For our first evidence, according to History.com, Edward de Vere died in 1604, but some of Shakespeare's greatest pieces were published after, such as Macbeth, King Lear, and The Tempest. Shakespeare was still producing amazing work after the death of Edward de Vere, providing us with such evidence that Edward de Vere should not be attributed to the plays of William Shakespeare. How would Edward de Vere be able to produce the plays afterwards, after his death, if he was the one behind Shakespeare's name? Secondly, according to AbsoluteShakespeare.com, William Shakespeare wrote and performed plays for the Globe. If he weren't the one to be writing the plays for the Globe, then how would one slip them in under his name and have William himself perform it? Shakespeare would start to catch on that someone else was working under his name. Wouldn't you be aware that somebody else was writing under your name if you were performing them and they were starting to give you credit? Why wouldn't you want to take the credit for such great work? Our last point is when within his will after death, it says that he had bequests to Hemmings, Bergag, and Condell. They later edited the first portfolio that attributed the plays to their fellow friend Shakespeare. So this here shows that William had witnesses to prove that he had done the absolute work and that the plays would all be attributed to him. With this coming from Absolute Shakespeare, it shows that he had witnesses behind him to prove that he had done the work. William Shakespeare not only did amazing work, but should be fully attributed to the work that he produced. His fellow friends agreed to such, and so does the history behind it all. Thank you, and now I stand for questioning.
where was the evidence for the last one?
You need to stand, please.
Absolute Shakespeare.
Oh, shoot.
Right, so you said that his friends wrote down his plays after he died, but like, so a lot of people have their plays written down, so just because his friends did it, did that mean that they were the ones that were responsible? I mean, they could have done it for anyone and then just gave William Shakespeare proof. So, how do you know for sure that?
Absolute Shakespeare says that William Shakespeare had left the plays under their names, and then they took it into their honor and everything, that's their friend, and they witnessed him writing the plays and sonnets and everything, and gave him credit for it.
So I'm doing the rebuttal for their section. The second, we're gonna start with the second one that they made, the point that they made that that Shakespeare wrote plays for the Globe Theater and they performed plays, and so why wouldn't he have taken the credit for his work? But we found that on the same website, well, close to the same, absoluteshakespeare.com, that Edward de Vere, he composed and directed plays as well at the same time as Shakespeare. He was part of the same acting area, and he did called the Oxford Boys. So they both did acting of the plays. So he didn't take credit for it, but as we said earlier in our own case, that those of the higher court and with higher status, they didn't state that they wrote plays or put their names on it because they were afraid of being frowned upon. So that is why he wouldn't do that. As for the witness, for having witness for his plays, you said that, or they said that after he died, they wrote the plays. So that doesn't quite mean that he had evidence for the plays. And then the first reason was him dying before the plays, Edward dying before some of the greatest plays were written. That goes along with having witnesses for the plays, so he could have had someone else, or he wrote it down and then someone else opened up the plays to the public. And that's it. Any questions?
I'm the first co-response. In response to Hamlet, if what you are saying is that De Vere was afraid to branch out and create his own pieces of work and plays because he was forced into a field of study that he does not per se what to pursue. Why not after the death of his relatives did he go and take credit for this work that people believe that has to be his own? Why would you be ashamed or afraid to showcase your work to anybody? Was it because of aristocrats? Can you answer that? Can you answer as to why the man who is famously credited with writing Hamlet and presumably some of Shakespeare's other work re-emerged out of the woodworks and take credit for what he is said to have written? You all can You all cannot tell me that the fear of rejection is more valuable, outweighs that of being known for something remarkable than being famous. You say that Edward de Vere went to school and got all of his education that leads him to being the person behind Shakespeare. But let me remind you that de Vere went to law school. Tell me, do you honestly think that if you were this good at writing plays or sonnets, you would hide behind someone else's name? No, we all know that everyone would want to take credit for what that and be able to tell our parents that we are proud of our work and that we have found something that makes us happy. Yes, Shakespeare may have not received schooling either, but keep in mind that he went off the radar for a few years in his life. Who knows what he could have done in this time period? AbsoluteShakespeare.com says that people believe that he traveled and learned all things he wrote about. While traveling, he could have picked up a lot of things, such as literature and how things are different everywhere. And that'll be it. You have any questions?
So I have a few questions. So, you said, why not take credit after his family died? Well, if he's still an aristocrat and he's still in that high society that's going to reject him for doing this, even though your family's dead, you're still in that same, you're still where you started. So why would you put yourself in that same instance? You're still in the same pool. Also, if William Shakespeare was as great as you said, why is no one in his family really, what's the word I want? They're really illiterate. He never taught his family how to write. If he was this great writer, this great author, how come no one in his family knows anything about literature? His children, his daughter Susan, did not learn how to write until after her first marriage, where he taught her how to write, not her father. Can you explain that? Why would you not teach your own family to write if you're this great, renowned author? Okay. Also, what were the names of the friends that you keep saying saw him write his plays?
Freebag and Condell.
And for my final question, so you said he went off the radar for a few years and there's nothing on that. So how do we know that he was actually doing anything productive? For all we know, he could have went to the Bahamas and was sitting on the beach for a few years doing nothing. I'm good.
Is it 1 minute work time? First affirmative.
So, after all that we've heard, I'm here to try and rebuild this. So, one of their points was, why did he not take credit after his family died? Well, even though his family did die, he was still an aristocrat. And that meaning still that he was going to be frowned upon and judged out of his certain group if he was to reveal himself as a writer. So he kept up with his pen name. Also, William Shakespeare had a son-in-law named John Hall who kept an extensive journal in which he wrote of the excellent poet Michael Dryden. But he failed to mention his father-in-law's association with a theater, drama, or literature. Why is that? And if we take away all these plays and sonnets that we're up here talking about, what is left of William? What did he write? What else did he do with his life besides travel around and supposedly write things?
First negative.
Okay, so although there will be skepticism about who wrote these plays, you cannot undercredit Shakespeare for the excellent work he has done, proving that he is well within his means of writing all of these plays, including the ones presumed to be documented by De Vere. One point that Alicia had was that if William didn't have literature, what would he be? He was actually a very successful businessman, and I have failed to write down the franchises that he owned, but he did have I forgot what it was called. But he did own I'm gonna move on. And she also went on to state that he was an aristocrat, and if he produced plays, wouldn't he be branching out of that certain group of people? And also, the list that William Shakespeare produced on is far more elaborate than just that of Hamlet, which is one of the only plays I think that is skepticized on whether he wrote or not. He went on to write Julius Caesar's Macbeth, The Winter's Tale, The Merry Wives of Windsor. So although he is questioned to write some of the plays that he did, I believe, write, he has still showcased that he is perfectly capable of producing other works of art.
Second affirmative.
In conclusion, if once you look through Edward de Vere's history with education and being involved with the courts, we find that for a long period of his time, he's with his uncle, Henry Howard, who was taught him how to speak, or not speak, write, and just all of the education that was taken. With his he had another uncle, William Cecil, and along with his education, he got access to an impressive library that was one of the biggest in at the time. So his education was very high. Um, and in conclusion, that we find that Edward de Vere is the rightful owner and author of William Shakespeare's plays. He had high knowledge and superior education. He was afraid of being frowned upon for aristocrat publishing. There are also similarities between Edward's life and the character Hamlet, and a lot of the evidence to support that is on, there's actually a Edward de Vere Society that has their own page of the evidence they have for his education and why his life relates to Hamlet. For these reasons, people will understand that Edward de Vere is a true William Shakespeare. Thank you, and thanks for coming.
Okay, to close up the negative side on this, we'd like to make it clear that William Shakespeare was the one who wrote all the plays and should get credited for it. Yeah, he may not have got the best education or whatever, but he sure did go off the radar, and who knows what he did within that time. Everybody believes that he went on to travel and get the education elsewhere. We as humans have hunger for success. We want to become that person who made it, which was exactly what Shakespeare had accomplished, which also comes with doubts from others, and the belittlement of oneself. To be frank, I think that to say Shakespeare didn't write some of his best work is not only comical, but I do not believe for a second that Shakespeare was not the original author of any of his works he published. That's about it. Thank you for your time and effort.